Check, check, check. Check, check, check. 1, 2, check. Hey. What up, what up, what up, what up? What's up, all my YouTube peoples? It's been a while since I've done a podcast. Yeah, this time we wanted to talk about ancient aliens. Of course, no, I'm just kidding. Not ancient aliens. A lot of new archaeological discoveries and a lot of cool stuff. Look, I got a fat folder here, 17 gigabytes worth of files. So y'all ready? Y'all ready to get your mind blown? I haven't done a podcast in a while. COVID has gotten everything back open, so COVID's over. So congratulations, we made it. So that means that the DJ stuff is, back in full effect. So been doing lots of gigs. Been taking care of bike shop stuff. As you guys know, I have a new baby. His name is Olin. He's really awesome. So lots of new developments. I'm getting fatter. New development as well. But enough of that. Let's get into some cray stuff because we finna go all night and we're gonna talk about everything. So much cool stuff that I discovered. I kind of just like every time I find something new, I just put it in this file, keep it in my notes in my phone, and then download it later. So I'll show you guys what I have. Huge folder with the stuff. I kind of divided it into 4 sections, so we can kind of attack this in 4 different categories. Anything from ancient technology to human origins, megalithic structures, and then scientific / religious observations. So yeah, it's gonna be a good one, guys. Oh, got the yerba mate on deck. Stay focused. Yeah, so let's get started. I want to break into my recently acquired theory of human origins. So this is kind of interesting because, I'm sure you guys know science thinks that they know everything until new discoveries are made, and then they have to kind of change what the accepted, status quo for that scientific discovery at the time is. So I have a little clip here of Graham Hancock, kind of with Russell Brand talking a little bit about what he thinks about Mesoamerican cultures.
So I found myself endlessly in opposition with archaeologists because I feel I need to point up their failures and their mistakes and to help the public to understand that we're not dealing with the word of God here. We're dealing with the word of fragile human beings who have their own egos and their own careers to pursue and who may pursue mistaken lies. And unfortunately, these are the people who we've entrusted with interpreting our past to us. And if they've got our past wrong, then it's only us through our own actions who are going to perhaps put it right. And that's one of the things that I've done in this new book, which is called America Before.
Not yet, Graham.
No,
that wasn't natural enough.
No, it is natural. I'm going to say why.
No, it felt forced.
Well, I'll tell you why, Russell. Because I've taken a lot of stick for this.
Your wife and daughter are chuckling.
I've taken a lot of stick for this in particular, which is called the Clovis First model. The Clovis First model is a model of the peopling of the Americas. And it is a notion which has been taught in schools. It's based on archaeology, and it's been taught to every American, and indeed to people all around the world.
There was a bridge made out of ice, and they crossed over the ice bridge, and then the bridge is gone now because it got too hot. And that's how they got there. They've only been there 13,000 years.
You saved me a huge amount of talking.
They popped over the ice bridge, and there's nothing else to worry about. Next!
Well, exactly. That's it. And basically, people were taught that there had been no human beings in America before 13,000 years ago, because there was a particular combination of lowered sea levels and an opening up of a ice-free corridor in the North American ice.
So, all right. First of all, this is like word for word. I play this clip because this is exactly what I've been believing these days, which is that it's kind of weird to think that the Americas have only been founded 13,000 years ago from hunter-gatherer type civilizations. It makes absolutely no sense that you can get megalithic structures from those types of civilizations. So everybody who thinks about the ancient origins of humans, the first thing that they're going to think of is the Americas, the New World. I also don't like the way that that's framed, the New World, as if the Mesoamerican cultures are primitive or underdeveloped in some kind of way. So I've always felt a certain way about this whole idea that we all descend from Asiatic people, that crossed over the Bering Strait. I've always not liked that idea, but I'll show you guys some recent discoveries that supports this theory. But here, I'll play this.
Allowed people to pour through into the Americas then.
Ice bridge.
I'm not, no, there's the ice bridge, which is Beringia, but then you cross, Beringia is now the Bering Straits. Beringia connected at one time Siberia to Alaska. It was above water. It was an ice bridge. Sea level was 400 feet lower then than it is today. Okay, and it was an ice bridge. But then when you cross that ice bridge, what did you find? You found yourself confronting the North American ice cap, which is 2 miles deep. A mountain of ice 2 miles deep blocks your path. You're stuck in this bit of land between Siberia and Alaska. You can't go further. But then around 13,000 years ago, because of global warming, a corridor opens up in the middle of the North American ice cap that allowed people to trickle through it into the resource-rich Great Plains of North America. And for more than 60 years, it was the position of archaeology that the first human beings to enter the Americas were those humans who came across the Bering Land Bridge 13,000 years ago, found that ice-free corridor, and entered the Americas. Because of that position, it was impossible to consider that it was not even worth thinking about America in the role of the origins of human civilization. Why should the Americas have had anything to do with the origins of human civilization if human beings had only been in the Americas for 13,000 years, whereas they'd been in Europe for 60,000 or 70,000 years? And by the way, recently there's just been a new piece of news the last couple of days. Anatomically modern human remains in Europe dating close to 200,000 years ago have been found. And they'd been in Asia for 60 or 70,000 years, Australia for at least as long, but in America for only 13,000 years. So why would we look for the origins of civilization in America? And thus a whole avenue of inquiry concerning this vast landmass of the Americas was just cut off.
That's the key, that the inquiries into anything beyond 13,000 years is cut off. And that's really unfortunate because it's like science used a ruler to measure the Americas and said, there's no way anything can be beyond 13,000 years old. But look at the erosion on these rocks and look at the way that this was formed. It has to be older. No. It can't be older than, you know. And it always goes back to 13,000 years for whatever reason. 12,500, 13,000 years ago, the last ice age or whatever. But let's take a look at why I think that this theory is wrong. First of all, if you look at a map, you can see that the ancient civilizations with the oldest megalithic structures of the most complicated types are in South America, in the Peruvian area, like the Andes, Lake Titicaca and stuff like that, Ollantaytambo. We'll pull up some of that stuff in a bit, old megalithic structures. But you can see that here as an example. The idea is that people came in from the Bering Strait, came into Alaska, came down through North America, then through Mexico, somehow populated that. They leave out the islands here, even though there's a whole people that lived in the Caribbean islands, and in South America. And then, if this is true, then the older civilizations would be in the Northern American, Canadian areas, and the newer civilizations would be down here in South America. But the archaeological evidence points against that, because the older megalithic structures are all in South America. The more complicated, bigger structures with, stones weighing up to, I don't know how many tons, stuff that can't be made today. And then you look at the ancient Mayan civilization, the ancient Aztec civilization in Central America and Mexico, and those structures are still big, but they are using smaller stone. So everything has the structures became less complicated. The further north you go in the Americas, the less complicated the structures get. You get to New Mexico, California, and the Four Corners area, and you have Native American tribes, First Nations, and you look back at their stuff, and they had some really cool ruins that are dated at like 1,000 years ago, or 100 BCE or whatever. And none of that stuff is as complicated or intricate or as scientific as some of the evidence found in South America. The further up you go, Alaska, the less stuff you get. So this idea that everything migrated from north to south is really weird, and that means that it would have happened in 13,000 years. All of this would have to be populated in 13,000. It just seems like not enough time to make all that happen. And then another huge piece of evidence is the fact that the islands in the Caribbean, Haiti, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, all of these islands here, island of Hispaniola, they are not descendants of people from either Mexico or North America. They're descendants of South Americans. So the Arawak people, I'll pull it up right here, you guys can see. Some people know them as the Taino people. This would be the native indigenous population of the Caribbeans. And this is what, this is the people that Christopher Columbus or whatever encountered when he first landed in the Caribbeans, and he thought he was in India, so he called these people Indians. And for whatever reason, we're still Indians, but whatever. Before they were known the Taino, they were known as the Arawak. And so these are actually really interesting people, because the Arawak, not only did they bring traditions and certain things from South America, like the cacao bean and tobacco and cocaine, the coca leaf, but they also brought up ayahuasca and a lot of the ancient, what I would call psychedelic stuff that they used to do. They used to sniff some stuff with some little pipe. Let's see if I can pull up. Right here. So jojoba is one of these ceremonial trees with a Y-shaped nasal snuff. that they would inhale. It was a psychoactive drug. I read a lot about it. It has nothing to do with tobacco. It's a bean, a bean that contains DMT, which the Arawak people discovered in the Caribbean islands as a replacement for ayahuasca, because the plants necessary for ayahuasca didn't grow in the Caribbean islands, so they had to think of a new way to essentially still get DMT. They figured out a different way to synthesize it besides just ayahuasca, which is really crazy. But yeah, the Arawak people is really interesting how they migrated from south to north. And they also discovered that because of basic language and hieroglyphs and stuff like this, that most of the Arawak people came from South America, and customs, artwork, everything came from South America. So it's really interesting how they migrated up into the Caribbean islands. So if that's true, if they went from northern South America up into the islands, doesn't it stand to reason that if they traveled by sea, of course they would have traveled through the narrow land bridge that is Central America to get to Mexico, and essentially they would have founded the Mayans and the Olmecs and the Aztecs that came after the Mayans and all of this. So, and you can see that some of the civilizations do predate Mesoamerican Olmecs. So if the history, the consensus of history today is that the Olmecs are not as old as some ancient South American, like say for example like the Incas, then how could the Incas have come from the Olmecs, from the Mexicans? It makes no sense. You know what I mean? It just literally doesn't make sense. But let's look at the archaeological evidence that supports this theory of south to north as opposed to north to south. One of the first things that we can look at is archaeological evidence in South America. They found some human remains that are dated to something like 20,000 years ago. So how could they have found 20,000-year-old bones in South America? It makes no sense that they came over this land bridge only 13,000 years ago. So that makes no sense at all. So let's look at through some of this stuff. So here is archaeological evidence found in I believe Idaho that points to humans being in the area as long as 14,800 years ago. So it says humans might have first settled North America around 16,000 years ago, right? Why? Because that's the latest piece of evidence. So now you just push it back a few years. Now it's 16. That makes no sense. Like, you can't say humans might have first settled North America around 16,000 years ago, because that's the earliest evidence that you have. You can't do that. You have to say that they could have been here before. We can only prove they've been here up until 16,000 years ago. So the way that this is worded is very weird, I like to think that science has formed a new religion. Scientologists took the name before they could have got to it, but at this point they're going on faith. They're not really going on evidence. But even Native American people don't want to consider this whole Bering Strait idea. That 13,000 years ago, it just doesn't make any sense. And this article kind of goes through some of the same arguments that I just went through. So, but now excavations are now pointing at 16,000 years old in Pennsylvania as well. So in North America, they found 16,000. I have an article somewhere in here where they found some stuff could have been dated back 20,000 years in South America. That is a recent, like, super big discovery. Here's some rinky-dinky article. First humans arrived in North America, 116,000. This guy's out of his mind. But yeah, so like, people want to push it back as far as they can. But my guess is that humans have been around the continent of America for as long as they've been around in pretty much any other continent. I mean, look at animals. You go around the world, and I keep lizards, so I like to keep track of lots of reptiles. But there's crocodiles in China. There's crocodiles in Africa. There's crocodiles in Florida. There's crocodiles in Mexico, Brazil. There's crocodiles fucking everywhere. India. If crocodiles can evolve everywhere and more or less be the same animal, give or take a few features here and there, why is it that a humanoid being that can migrate and travel and hunt and gather, you would think that they would be able to evenly distribute pretty quickly? And the history of humans is a lot older than people try to make it look. I mean, look at the timeline of human evolution. I mean, Homo sapien has been around for what, like they say 200,000 years or something like this. So we cannot account for anything beyond 12,000 years. A lot of people point to some ancient cataclysm that could have destroyed everything, 12,500 years ago. I kind of like to believe that theory. It makes a lot of sense. A lot of ancient civilizations talk about things blowing up about 12,500 years ago. So that's really interesting. Other things that are unexplained is like the islands in the Pacific. Here, this maritime history says that people could have been boating around, thousands of years ago. People could have been using boats thousands of years ago. So, like there's evidence now that people were in the Philippines and in, the Micronesian areas and the Polynesian and Melanesian islands up to 100,000 years ago using primitive forms of boats to float around. So there's a lot of things that are unexplained. DNA now points to the fact that ancient civilizations in those areas could have been that old, and some of these paintings that they leave behind, pretty amazing. Australian Aboriginal paintings that are 100,000 years old or something crazy like that. So petroglyph type stuff, really interesting. Let's look at some of this megalithic structure stuff, because that kind of explains a lot of this stuff. More gives you a more visual aspect as to why I believe some of this stuff, which is pretty interesting. First of all, my theory of south to north. There's these really crazy. I'm sure if you watch Ancient Aliens or any of these fucking alien TV shows, you would have seen like Pumapunku, which is this crazy place that has these enormous blocks, megalithic blocks cut out of solid stone, really precisely and stuff, that scientists still to this day cannot date and have no idea how they were built. And they say they could be 900 years old. It's like such a conservative estimate. Like why do they do that? It makes no sense. You know what I mean? But the Romans could have cement 2,000 years ago, and that's how they built cathedrals, because they're smart and they have technology. But the ancient Mayans, nah, they used chisels and hammers, and they chiseled away at this shit for like 100 years as slaves. That's what they want. That's what they want us to believe. That's how we built this shit. It's ridiculous, Oh, but the Romans, no, they had concrete. They invented concrete. Their technology was superior 2,000 years ago. But take a look at some of this crazy stuff. I mean, the way that it's aligned with constellations and the enormity of the fucking blocks is pretty fucking incredible. And that's just some of the stuff that's in South America. There's a lot of stuff down there. I'll play a video of this guy at this place. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Ollantaytambo, which is also in Peru.
El material de construcción, piedra granito, the granite, okay, granite stone.
Solid granite fucking rock.
Es una piedra muy dura, muy fuerte, muy pesada teniendo en cuenta el tamaño. They're so heavy, of course, each of them, but also they're really tough, really hard, this building material.
Look at how those look at how enormous they fucking
Each
are.
of them 90 tons.
At the top of a mountain.
90 tons. Por each
It's crazy.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 blocks. You can see smaller stones down behind of you with only 50, 60 tons. 1997, a lot of archaeologists discovered below of each of them, below of each stones.
So some of the interesting points that I have to make about this these structures in South America that prove this theory of a cataclysm happening in North America is the elevation. So the place where Pumapunku, the place that has these crazy big old megalithic blocks, is low. It's relatively low when you consider its elevation to sea level. So if there were a great flood of some sort, that would be the place to be flooded. So I've always wondered, why did the Incas build Machu Picchu at the top of a fucking mountain where their air is really thin and there's nothing can grow there? And the answer might be that could be where they fled when this cataclysmic event happened and they had nowhere else to go. And that's how the Inca Empire was formed, which was the Mesoamerican Empire that came much later. And you can tell based on their construction that it came much later. I mean, take a look at Pumapunku and some of the discoveries here.
The body of one of the classic kind of statue monoliths, some we see in the Kalasasai temple, in the sunken temple.
That thing's rad.
Also in the museum. But here is one lying on the ground outside the eastern part of Tiwanaku. It's probably about 6 foot long. I'm going to measure this in a moment. I guarantee if we pull it over, the underside of it will be in perfect condition. I bet you there's amazing carvings on it. And it could actually...
Look, check out some of this crazy stuff he finds inside the building.
Of Tiwanaku. It's where the Pacoitia monolith that was also found there.
This is brand new shit too. This is like some brand new shit.
Got this Sumerian potentially inscription, very similar to Göbekli Tepe, Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, obviously all over
cool
the
as
later
rocks.
Inca world as well. And this shape was incidentally a pool, like horizontal pool on top of the Akapana pyramid. We have the false doorways that kind of go nowhere. We see similar styles at Ollantay Tambo. Where we see these kind of small doorways that go nowhere. This is the back of one of the main artifacts that are in this secret room in the museum. This is yet another doorway, and you can see that this was a very prominent design spec that we find. This is the front of the one I just showed you, and it just shows you the intricate technology of stonework that they were working with here. It's just really quite remarkable that this room is out of bounds. You can't go in there. I was very fortunate. I timed it on a day when they were doing works in the room. But hopefully these will be on display at some point because I feel they're very important. This is obviously a hold stone. We do find examples in the Tiwanaku site that are used for acoustic properties. But these ones are really intrigued me. These have got like sort of hexagons on them, which almost like come up like kind of tubes into the surface. Now, I first thought, myself and JJ thought they were kind of like part of the headdress of Viracocha that we find on some of the statues. But there's a couple of other examples here which are very baffling. We've seen similar stones like this at Pumapunku. So these are probably from Pumapunku. It's probably a design spec of that site. All along the bottom of this one, you can see little bits of evidence
that one. That one's
there
crazy.
as well. With the cross obviously carved in the center, and you can see down the left hand side there as well, probably more of these shapes kind of emerging like a 3D almost crystal coming out of the rock. These are obviously parts of the aqueducts that we find all over Tiwanaku and
There are all these
Pumapunku.
theories that maybe they aren't carving this stone, maybe they're molding it or softening it in a way. They call it geopolymer technology. There's all these conspiratorial theories talk about how the stone is formed. Kind of makes sense.
On a slab, but when you look closely, you can see that it's got these shapes, these beautiful geometric shapes, all over the outer edge. So what's this? Is it the representation of some kind
Look
of
at
wings
that. Look at
or
how the
feathers, or is
lines
it something
follow the
else?
hexagonal
Again,
pattern.
more aqueducts here, probably used for water, but it could have been a metal processing plant. And again, doors to nowhere. This is very reminiscent of what we see at Pumapunku. So the things we're finding here at Tiwanaku that are not on display are possibly, to me, these are some of the most important pieces that have been found at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku. So we hope one day they will be on display, because they're very important. This is very abstract. There's different kind of glyphs almost carved on this one, almost like some kind of writing. As you can see, more detail as we zoom in a little bit there. Again, we sort of more abstract forms. This doesn't look very neat and tidy, but again, they're actually an example of another type of keystone cut, and we have like a drill.
We'll talk about
core
keystone
there,
cuts in a
which
bit
is
as well.
for those
I have some interesting information about keystone cuts and this old stone stuff. But look at Otanyaitambo, or however you pronounce this fucking place. Look at these damn rocks.
This video that all of, as they are referred to, that are on the delivery path from the quarry.
They're enormous.
Moved to. Well, the stone is slowly starting to harden. Certain quartz-rich igneous stones could be.
Look at the fittings. Let's pay attention to the fittings.
And fitted into these amazing natural status over time.
Look at the fittings of the stone, right? Now let's pay attention to these fittings, because these are not only just found in South America, but this old megalithic work, if you look at the Easter Island wall, very similar. And if you look at some of the newly discovered ancient ruins in Cambodia that I'll show you guys next, they have very similar stone stacking, which is pretty incredible how they can have these curves and these, perfectly mated surfaces, but then this area here be a perfect shape that, was required for whatever reason, whatever they used this for. Really interesting.
To me, so it couldn't be softened.
Check that out.
It was left behind. This is why it's still there, right in the way, in several places.
Now, the thing about these structures is that
I hope that you found this video.
It's kind of obvious that these are megalithic and incredible and really old. And then the newer civilization, the Incas, they just kind of built on top of it with smaller rocks. You can tell the difference between the Inca structure and the potentially, pre 12,500 year old rock that's sitting there in, Pumapunku and Ollantaytambo. Just pretty crazy stuff. Like, even like this rock has like interesting cuts, really precise cuts. Looks like you can almost do that with like a router, or I don't know. And then peculiar holes within that cut. Super interesting. What would you need that for, and why would you go through the trouble of doing that? Really trippy. But take a look at some of the rocks and how they're fitted in some of these other places that I've been looking at, specifically Cambodia. Cambodia has some really interesting stuff, and also Easter Island here. Let's check out Easter Island for a second. Because, Easter Island would be, maybe somewhat closer to South America. You can see South America's here. This is kind of where Lake Titicaca is, and Pumapunku, and look at Easter Island right here. Kind of trippy, right? But if we kind of, we used to think that these were just heads until they excavated them. We realized they're actually huge megalithic structures, which is really trippy. But there's a wall inside of Easter Island, so we won't get much into their ancient mythology and the things that they believed, because they have some super crazy ideas on how the universe was created. And the anthropological evidence for these sites, it's ridiculous. Like, they were only recently discovered, like in the 90s or whatever, and some maybe in the like 1928 or something like that. But they want to say that this was created only 900 years ago or something. It's really dumb. Scientists have no excuse for being so lazy. But see, no, they don't have the wall in here. But there's a wall built in Easter Island that looks very similar to these other walls in South America. It's really trippy. Here, let's go to. Maybe I got it up in this motherfucker. Let's see, and I'll show you guys. No, I don't have the picture, but here's the images of the keystone cuts, which are done on rocks in South America, right? So at the edge of every rock, you can see that there's almost like some type of connection here, some type of cut into the stone to form a connection, and that's really interesting because it's not the only place where they have them. Here's another picture of a keystone cut, right? Almost as if they poured maybe like molten metal in there or something to form like a brace, a connection brace, to keep them from shifting apart. So there are several images of keystone cuts. The crazy thing is that some of these pictures are from Cambodia. So that's really interesting because they use the exact same technology in Cambodia. Can somebody explain that? I don't know if you guys have heard of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, but there's like a place that's like enormous and has all these crazy. I'll show you guys. It's really an amazing place. It's enormous. There's huge megalithic work, and thousands of man hours of rock cut out of this place with super intricate carvings covering every inch of this place. And people want to say that this was also created maybe 900 years ago, and it's enormous. It's the size of like 300 football fields or something like this. Really amazing place. And this place has some stones that have also keystone cuts in them. So it's kind of interesting. And they found other things inside of Angkor Wat that are really interesting. Besides other ancient monuments, I'll show you guys. Because everybody knows that, well, not everybody, but in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, and these places, they're pretty close to India. And so before they were Buddhists, the people spoke a language called Brahmi. And before they were Buddhists, they wrote in Sanskrit, and they were Hindus. They worshipped Naga. This is a depiction of Naga. And then they worshipped Vishnu and all the Hindu gods. So it's really interesting to see ancient Hindu temples in Southeast Asia using these look at this river covered in what they call lingams, which are these weird little orb-like things that somebody took the trouble of carving out for miles in this damn river. Really intense, really crazy place, with intricate carvings all along the banks like this of just ancient Hindu gods. And you see a lot of keystone cuts there. You see a lot of similar technology. Here's an image of a lingam with the thing surrounding it. And if you look at this, it's kind of interesting because this is like a huge diagram of Angkor Wat. If you think about it, you have the entrance of Angkor Wat, you have the 5 towers, and you have the surrounding moat, right? And then you have this, or this is the moat with lingams inside of it, and then you have this surrounding area. So if you look at Angkor Wat and the layout is very similar, and this other place is like miles away from this place. So it seems like the design traits are similar across. So this is how it looks from the aerial photo. So it looked very similar to that drawing in the water. Really weird stuff. And this is dated like 200 BCE or something. This is abandoned. You can just go visit this place. It's just on some random trail. You can just go and find it in Cambodia. Cambodian authorities don't really close this stuff off. It's kind of just open for anyone to check out. You can see a few more images of the same carvings here. You can see water is just running over it. Nobody is keeping this from erosion or anything. It's been there thousands of years. Nobody cares. Or according to scientists, hundreds of years. But really interesting. These ruins are just in the middle of the jungle on a random trail. Almost looks like something destroyed everything there. Some type of earthquake, cataclysmic event or something. But there's this dude on YouTube who kind of reviews more of these Southeast Asian areas. I'll play one of his clips for you guys. And if you want to check out more of his stuff, you can kind of maybe look up his YouTube. I'll play one for you guys here. Here, let's see. Oh, here's another interesting discovery, recent discovery. Is this crazy that they found in Cambodia as well. A stone turtle in Cambodia. So somebody dug up this stone turtle inside of the moat of Angkor Wat, because nobody even bothered to dig in there. But they pulled out. Well, first they pulled out the turtle, right? And it looked like this. Had no cutouts or anything, but they tapped all around it and figured out that it was hollow. And so then they picked at it and they realized that these turtles had it was more than one, that they had holes in their back. So, and keep in mind, these things were buried under dirt and underwater. So they opened these things up, and you can see some of them had a triangular shell like this. Some of them had a square shell like this. And what they found inside was a silica gel substance within the stone. And keep in mind, this thing is made of solid stone. And in there they found that silica gel putty stuff in one of them, with some type of brass wires in there. And then they found these quartz crystals, like hundreds of quartz crystals inside of these turtles. They plucked all the crystals out and kind of took them to these Buddhist temples, and they started worshiping them, which is like really unfortunate, because a bunch of archaeological evidence just went to some random temples and no one even knows where it went anymore. But they also found these tridents. So if we look at the configuration of the elements, we have a turtle, we have some type of liquid. You can say like silica would be like a transistor, or like a type of, it's an electrical component, let's say. And everybody knows that quartz is a piezoelectric mineral. So if you apply pressure to quartz, it creates electricity. And if you apply electricity to quartz, it creates vibration. And so people speculating that maybe this was some type of ancient radio, or that was either emitting or receiving signals as some type of ancient communication device. And that's, lots of speculation, but it is kind of strange that they found actual quartz, silica gel, and bronze wires all within the inside of these strange turtles buried underground. You have to admit that that's a really weird thing to just find underground. So I took the trouble of looking up some crystal stuff to show you guys, some really OG videos on crystal science. So because look, I hate the talk of crystals, because crystals get really woo woo, like, all right, every time someone brings up crystals, even I clown on people that think crystals have energies and shit like this. Like, it's just ridiculous. But some of my homies are like, "Oh no, I love crystals, bro. Energy and chakras and shit like this." And besides all of that woo-woo stuff, let's focus on the true science behind crystals. Crystals are actually amazing. We use crystals to power speakers. Like if you ever heard of a speaker with a piezo tweeter, that speaker has a crystal inside of the driver which is performing those tweeter-like sounds. And quartz watches function on a quartz crystal. And a lot of things function on crystals. So crystals are actually like pretty amazing. You can see in this video.
You've learned that frequency stability is of the utmost importance. As an example, let's
look at this
consider a
dude's
radio
haircut.
broadcast station. One particular regulation prohibits the frequency of the station from changing more than a few cycles, so that the station will not interfere with another station operating on a nearby frequency. Now, for this reason, the oscillator producing this frequency must be one with the very best frequency stability. Crystal by which mechanical stress produces electric charges, and conversely, electric charges produce mechanical stresses. Now, this is saying nothing more than if a voltage is applied to the crystal, it will vibrate. The amplitude of these vibrations are much greater at one frequency than at any other frequency. Now, this one particular frequency is called the natural resonant frequency of the crystal. Now, let's look at some of the crystal substances that possess the piezoelectric characteristics. They are Rochelle salt, tourmaline, and quartz. Now, of these three, Rochelle salt exhibits the piezoelectric effect to the greatest degree.
And today we have ceramics that do the same thing. Ceramic crystals.
Now, also, quartz crystal in its natural form has pointed ends. Now, let's take a look at this drawing so that we can determine more about the quartz crystal. The top viewed indeed shows us that the quartz crystal has a hexagon shape, 6 diamond cutting. Here, this frequency stability must be maintained between two parallel plates of the holder. See that the Q of the crystal would be many times greater than that of the LC tanks. We said that the crystal must exhibit the piezoelectric effect.
So that's crazy. The government, making these videos explaining piezoelectricity.
One of the most beautiful and useful of minerals is rock crystal or quartz. Quartz is brilliant and clear in its pure form, but it takes on colors and tints when it contains holding angles of...
Check out how far the military was willing to go to mine crystal from Brazil.
The rings on the
for
etched
war,
wafer has a
for sonar, for
fine
submarines.
abrasive are next the frequency on that required when the ellipse turns as slowly as shown here, up to heights much greater than those expected under normal operating conditions. When room pressure is attained, the bells are filled and sealed.
So it's crazy. We use crystals for almost everything. Here's a schematic of a quartz tuning fork inside of a quartz watch, and this is how we're able to get every second so precise on every digital watch, basically. So crystals are used for very scientific purposes. This is a quartz tuning fork inside of a basic watch, and any old watch that you get will have one of these things in there. Unless it's a mechanical watch, of course. But a mechanical watch loses, I don't know, something like 5 seconds per day. A quartz crystal doesn't lose any seconds. So this is made of quartz. And basically, you feed electricity to the fork, and it vibrates at 32,000 some amount of hertz or whatever. And so that you divide it many, many times, and basically you get 60 seconds. And this is how it keeps precise count. So it's interesting to think that back in the day, people were potentially maybe using old frequency technology, not only to build these monolithic structures, but for communication. We just don't know, because most of this stuff is just destroyed, and we just kind of built on top of it. So I always found that to be really, really interesting. But a lot of these old ancient structures have such similarities. It trips me out. Let's see if I can find that Easter Island wall that I wanted to show you guys on. That looks very similar to Peruvian construction. And how the rocks, yeah, this is it right here. Check out these rocks. I mean, tell me that the fitting on these stones doesn't look very similar to Peruvian walls. There's just no way in my mind that these two things can be unrelated. It looks like Ollantaytambo. To me, it looks the same. What is a coincidence that these walls can all be built with similar construction? And some of the Cambodian walls are even more trippy. They are really, really. They really show the degree to which they were built. Let me see if I can pull up one of those for you guys. Check this out. Check this guy out on YouTube. He's pretty chill.
Blocks of stone.
Look at this stone.
Here, the corner pieces. Look at the corner pieces. You think these are, for example, two
And this is in
pieces of
Cambodia.
stone, but they're not. Look at the right angle. This is just one piece of stone. Or it may not even be a stone. It may be like a geopolymer technology, because look, there's nothing in between, no connection. Look here. And then there are no connections. Look here.
It's similar to the Inca Empire building on top of these structures.
But look
The
at
ancient
corners.
Khmer
See
people
any
of
lines
Cambodia
in the corners?
built
No,
on
this
top
is
of these
one
megalithic
stone,
structures.
apparently. What kind of
These were there
technology is
before
this?
the Khmer Empire,
they
which is
make
900 years old.
These corners completely using single stone blocks. This needs extraordinary engineering. Now, let's go on the other side to see what's going on.
Shout out to the new subs. I see y'all.
Look at this piece. Again, no connection on the corners. But look here. This is not even just like one piece. It goes all the way here. And apparently it bends. The stone is bending at an angle. It's curving. And then comes here, goes at a 45-degree angle, and goes all the way outside. And I may have to go outside to show you where this rock ends, because this may not even be a rock. This is extraordinary technology. How did they build this?
It really is crazy, though.
Look at here, right?
The
Going
fitting
all
of the
way
stone is what intrigues
here.
me.
Look at this piece. There is a small bump.
It's
here
very similar
to
to
make this fit. Now,
Ollantaytambo,
none
and
of
it
the
even has
stones,
holes
or
in the
maybe
rock.
Some of the stones are rectangular or trapezoid, right? But none of these two-dimensional faces have four corners. They have more than four corners. This is extraordinary technology. Each one must weigh, I don't know how many thousands of pounds. And they were able to build this huge jigsaw puzzle 900 years ago. Now, how did they make this? And traditionally, archaeologists and historians will tell, well, they did it out of hard work. They were using chisels and hammers, and they were calculating using threads. Seems impossible to me to make these using chisels and hammers. But impossible to make them.
These are
with
trippy
chisels
too, and
hammers.
ancient Hindu
Engineers
structures have a lot of
agree
these
with
rotated
what I
type
say.
stone structures.
These can be created only using lathe technology. They have to have a rotating mechanism, a rotary mechanism to create these type of,
I mean, how else would you
turns.
fucking
Now,
chisel that?
let me show you
You're
more.
gonna chisel that out with a fucking hammer and a chisel? That's fucking impossible. Look at the carvings.
Look at this column, right? It's a little bit intact and it has a little bit more light. So look at this column. Look at these pieces, right? See, These were created using lathe technology. This proves that ancient builders were using machining technology. So how did they manage to have pillars high
Look at how
from the
fucking
ground level? And according to locals, all these rocks were not cut from the mountaintop. They were cut from the ground and then transported here. To see this doorway, to see if we look at how these are cut and placed. Now look inside. If you look inside, it appears as though they've cut all these solid chunks just like cutting butter. Look at the inside of these separated
That's crazy
stones.
precision
These
right
stone
there.
blocks have separated because of an earthquake. And look inside and you will be able to see the surface of these blocks. Look at how smooth they are. Many generations. And the oldest structures were built around 900 AD by a king called Yasovarman. And this part of the temple was said to be built by him. Oh, I think this is some kind of this entire the side.
The sad part about Cambodian structures is that because of the religion there and the many wars that have been fought, you know, Buddhism and versus Hinduism, you know, these structures are no longer considered Hindu structures, but they are now considered Buddhist structures. And they chiseled off a lot of these Hindu gods and put up their own, you know, their own Buddhas and stuff. And I have nothing against Buddha. You know, I think Buddha's cool, but they kind of destroyed some of the archaeological evidence and replaced it with their own ideologies. You know, they just put it right on top over the last 100 years or so. So that's kind of sad, but it's really an interesting place. I may want to go check out, you know, Cambodia, because it's got a lot of really cool stuff. Look at Angkor Wat and how they kind of like...
LiDAR works in a similar way to radar. It scans the ground by sending out 1 million laser points every 4 seconds and analyzing the information reflected back. The time it takes for each pass to break through the trees, hit the ground, and return is measured. The results are then mapped. The LiDAR data renders an outline of everything on the surface of the land. The glory of Angkor Wat becomes a ghostly outline of digital points. But LiDAR also reveals subtle indentations on the ground, and these reveal the shape of the original city. Angkor Wat is shown to be surrounded by the ghostly outline of a vast metropolis. And we can use this data to rebuild the city of Angkor as it would have looked over 900 years ago.
And they're not willing to go beyond 1,000 years ago, because then, you know, it makes European architecture look bad if any of this stuff is older. So nothing can really go beyond 1,000 years ago. It's kind of sad, but I mean, it's kind of clear to me that this, even the locals say that these structures have been there for longer than any of the people have ever really recorded. So these things have been there for a long, long time. And to say that these were created 900, I mean, it's possible, you know, it's possible. It was a lot of work, but just like the Inca Empire, you can see how they built stone structures on top of the megalithic structures. And you can tell right away. I'll show you.
Famous like Machu Picchu is, but it's equally as impressive because it has some astonishing megalithic work which defies for the 3 megalithic.
So you can see the OG stuff, crazy OG stuff.
Of stone that don't fit together. So why would anyone?
And then you can see the Inca Empire stuff is all the little rock stuff. They stack stones and use mortar to hold it together. That stuff they just added on top of these structures. So I think in a similar fashion, Cambodia did something very similar where they found these ancient megalithic structures and then on top of them, the civilizations that came after the Khmer Empire, then they added stuff on top of that. So to me, that makes way more sense. Just like the pyramids, people say that the Sphinx is probably at least 12,600 years old, but science won't let it go beyond, I think, like 1,200 years ago, 1,200 BCE or 2,000. I don't know. No, 2,000 BCE, 4,000 years old. I think that's as old as they're willing to go these days. They won't go as far as 12,600 years, even though all the evidence points to that. So here's another interesting thing. Under the coast of Cuba, they found some pyramid structures using LiDAR also. Really interesting stuff. All in the Caribbean islands, underwater. So that's another interesting recent discovery. This was June 4th. So a lot of new things, technology has come a long way. So a lot of new things are being discovered. Who knows what's under those waters? They say the ocean is one of the least explored places that we have. Same for Cambodia. Look, here's a map of Angkor Wat and what would have been the huge network of, there's like hundreds of temples that are destroyed there that are growing trees out of them that look really cool. I wish I could have time to explore all that stuff, but yeah, some of this. Everybody knows the pyramids and Stonehenge and these things, but I kind of want to look into some of these lesser known ones. Here's another one that was discovered recently, and so there's a lot of really new, interesting discoveries. Of course, here maybe I think there's another video. From the same dude.
This place is about 4 reach. It's coming out.
Oh yeah, the water.
And some of them are inside water. Look, you don't even see it. And you can see Brahma coming from his navel. Actually, I think the paint must have been a little bit fresh. The paint connects the lingam. That diameter must be at least like 2 feet long. That's a typical Vishnu sleeping on a giant snake with his wife. I hope you guys like this video. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.
Yeah, check that guy out. He has like hundreds of videos on just ancient structures in India and Southeast Asia. Pretty interesting, dude. But yeah, so this is just some of the weird correlations that you can make between some of these newer discoveries and some of these older discoveries. There's a lot of controversy based around this. The Cambodian government, a lot of these sites were open to the public, and they were just getting ruined from all the tourists. Like Angkor Wat is like the #1 tourist place in Cambodia, and it's just people were just stomping all over it, taking selfies and shit, just destroying stuff. So and someone's got to put a stop to that. But back to ancient civilizations. To me, it makes sense. Something happened 12,000 years ago, forced people to seek high ground, and then, who knows how long humans have been in North America. But it definitely seems to me that the migration started from south to north. And if you look at Southeast Asia, you can see that they definitely migrated from, I would say, the Tibet area, where Nepal, the origins of Buddhism and Hinduism and all that stuff came over to Southeast Asia. But of course, people have been there for thousands of years as well. I don't know how old the Southeast Asian cultures are, but they're really ancient. Same for Australia. People say Australians are one of the 60,000 years ago. They've had Aboriginals there, with crazy theories of how the universe was created, and we don't know anything about them because Europeans went and basically destroyed any evidence of any ancient civilizations in the last 400 years on purpose, because it was not in accordance with the Catholic Church. Some of the places here in North America, in the Four Corners, New Mexico, they don't have megalithic structures, but they have pretty interesting old structures. This one is said to have been 900 years old or something. So it's a really interesting place. Here's a city within a cave here in North America as well. I haven't visited any of these places. I'm like Google visiting at the moment. But I mean, if you look at the history, take a look at this chart for the evolution of life on Earth, and we go as far back as scientists are willing to say 4.6 billion years ago, right? And then we get right up to here to the Holocene era, which is 11,700 years old. And then before that, we aren't really willing to put humans there. Like, you know, for whatever reason, we think modern humans were only capable, like Homo sapien civilization was only capable of being created no longer than 10,000 years ago. Even though there's lots of evidence for it before that. They just like to think that we were living in caves. Who knows what was going on in those days? The honest truth is we don't know how old these structures are, you know? And we should have more of an open mind when we're looking up this stuff. I don't have to tell you guys about ancient Aztec calendars and, you know, all of this stuff is really, really interesting. And I'm sure you guys have looked into it. I just kind of want to look at the stuff people haven't looked at. And another thing to check out, this is the movie Chariot of the Gods, if nobody has checked it out. Kind of puts a lot of this stuff into perspective. The Aboriginals, the Ark of the Covenant, which we could talk a little bit about.
One side of the plates carrying a negative charge, the other a positive one. The Bible says the ark bristled with sparks and bright flashes, as in these old paintings. Indeed, when Moses had erected the ark, the Lord would speak to him through it.
Christianity is a really weird thing too. I think it's overlooked a lot of the time, because the Bible writes about Egypt, it writes about the Tower of Babel, it writes about Babylon, it writes about a lot of stuff, and we kind of overlook it. We could take a look at just the Ark of the Covenant for now, and some of the implications of the Ark. There's this guy, really cool guy, Nassim Haramein, which talks. He made a video. He's a physicist. He made a video on his take on the Ark of the Covenant. I'll show you guys that in a second. But for anyone that doesn't know what the Ark of the Covenant is, it's an ancient technological artifact written about in the Bible that can move rocks, and if you looked at it for too long, you would your skin would burn, you would die. So here I'll pull up the wiki for it. Just a quick biblical account. So, you know, everyone seems to think that Moses, when he crossed the sea, that he used his staff, that he brought he pulled up his staff and was like, oh, and then the fucking sea parted or whatever. That's not what happened at all. You read the Bible, and I've read the whole Bible. It says that he followed a pillar of fire, and that thing was what split the waters open. It wasn't God. It was the thing that he took from Egypt. Something, because, you know, he was essentially taking the Jews that were being enslaved in Egypt, and he was helping them escape. That's why it's called Exodus. And he took the Ark of the Covenant from Egypt. It could be the thing that was maybe within the pyramid, this ancient technological artifact, whatever it is. But it's what parted the waters. And there was a pillar of fire that escaped from it, and people walked with it as it parted the waters. And it's not the only account. There's also an account of it parting some rivers, and then there's also stories of them using the Ark of the Covenant in battle and using it to carry stones and throw stones at people. There's the story of the dude who fucking looks at it and turns to stone. And there's a story of people putting on particular types of ointments on their body to keep from burning up when they come close to the ark. All of this shit came from the Bible, and it's really specific as well in the construction of the container for the Ark of the Covenant. People like to think that the Ark of the Covenant is this fucking box right here, but it's not. It's what's inside the box, and the Bible actually has an account of how to build the box to keep it, and it's made of basically pure gold. So if something was really conductive, that's what I would keep it in. But anyways, enough of that. Here's the video of Nassim kind of explaining what his thoughts are on the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, if you look at these, so when you look at all these different cultures that talk about the sun gods, they talk about them bringing a lot of aspects to their society, engineering, mathematics, and all this stuff. But it's, and from the Sumerian center of the gods, the center of the sun gods culture, it seemed to be the center of their craft, the power source of their craft. And it's given to man to bring us to new levels of understanding and technology to help us along our path. Hence, organizations are put together, and that in culture you have to shield yourself from, that you have to handle it very, very careful capability, that are all centered around this object that is described in various ways as some kind of crystalline structure that produces high levels of radiation, that you have to shield yourself from, that you have to handle it very, very carefully, but that can help you lift very large object, that can make you split water, stop the course of water in a river, open a lake in half, open a sea, and it becomes something that you can actually, this object, or the legend about this object, is something you can start to follow through history. And most likely there was many of them on the earth at the time in this previous evolution, which again in all of these cultures is said to have ended with a great flood, a great catastrophe. And
right, so maybe people had multiple of these type of arcs that were used to form stone, and to maybe when you brought stone near this thing, it softened and they were able to make those intricate shapes. Who knows? But whatever this thing is, maybe there were more than one.
You can imagine that
before the Great Flood,
if you brought something that powerful to a culture that is not quite ready for, the experiment could go awry. That is, people may start getting greedy, may start trying to use it for destructive power and so on. And this is kind of what you get, the sense you get from studying all these cultures, that previous evolution had been given this power from the sun gods and developed very, very quickly to very advanced, but had difficulties in their level of consciousness to be able to truly live at that level of technological advancement. And it is appropriate, and I think it is conclusive when you read all those texts, that the sun gods may have thought, we need to remove this object from this planet. We need to take it back and let them evolve, learn about technology, learn about physics, learn about wars and what destruction does, and without this power, so that they would get the that they would get the maturity necessary to actually come back to this level of technology eventually. And I think that this natural cataclysm of the Great Flood, which might have been the meltdown of the last ice age, give them an opportunity to throw human consciousness and our evolution back in time, if you'd like, in our evolution, back into the dark ages, almost back to the caves. And
that's interesting, because that's kind of exactly what I've been saying, is that would have been why the Inca Empire built Machu Picchu way up in the Andes and decided to farm in a plateau structure. That may be why the Aztec Empire built their first city within a lake and farmed using what are those things called? Campechas, I forgot, but those water type farms to grow corn, and it could be why the Native Americans of North America, why all of their beliefs is that they came from under the ground, from caves, that the original people came from caves, and then one day they came back out after the Great Flood. Every ancient culture has a story of the Great Flood, by the way.
And give us an opportunity to grow and to mature before we regain this power. And as they did so, they left all of the information and some of the devices under very specific conditions on the planet, so that we could recover the information eventually. And so I followed the link. And eventually, in the case of the Egyptian, I found that it went from the Egyptian tradition. In the Egyptian tradition, it's represented as a sphere with wings. And the wings is because...
And everybody's seen that object, the sphere with the wings. The Freemasons use it. A lot of people use that symbol for the sun god or whatever.
It can hover. It has gravitational capability, and it's related to the sun, Ra, and it's represented on top of all the temple, at the entrance of all the temple, and that is why the sun gods were called sun gods. It's not because they venerated our physical sun. It's because their power came from an object that resembled a sun, a very radiant object. So eventually you follow it through the Egyptian culture, and you find that it is removed from that culture by a high priest that eventually realized that he is not Egyptian, but that he is actually born from Jewish descendants, and his name is Moses. And he, revolts against the Pharaoh of the time. Everybody knows the story about the battles of manifestation that goes on.
And we'll get into a little bit of biblical genealogical charts in a second, and kind of like the descendancy of humanity in the after the Great Flood, after Noah, in the Middle East. So we'll get into that in a bit, but we'll let this guy finish.
Frogs are falling from the sky. He throws his staff down and changes it into a snake and all these things. And then eventually he wins that battle of manifestation that might be related to being able to use this technology. Who can use it the best? And then he wins this, and the Pharaoh's allowing to leave, and with his tribes of Israel. And he takes off, but being the highest priest in Egypt, he has access to this object. And what I believe, and it's clear in the Bible when you read it, as he's going to the Red Sea, he is following something very specific. This pillar of cloud and this pillar of light at night that he's following towards the Red Sea.
This is true. I've read the Bible. It says
he
that.
actually takes off with the object, which is not what the high priest expected and the Pharaoh expected. So the Pharaoh realized he's taken off with this object. He gets upset about it, turns around and chases after him. In the Bible, it just says that he had a change of heart. I believe that it's because he realized that Moses left with this very powerful object. Moses goes towards the Red Seas following this object, and then it's said that he lifts his staff and the Red Sea opens. But if you actually read in the Bible much later, there's another instance where water is separated, and that is when the crossing of the Jordan occurs. And it's in the section where Joshua is now in charge of the tribes of Israel. And in this instant, it is much clearer, there's much more detail on how it's done. And it's clear, and if you read it, that the Ark of the Covenant of God was used to open the Jordan. And in the paragraphs where it talks about it, it says, and it shall be said that the Jordan was open as the Red Sea was opened by Moses. And saying that the same forces were used to open the Red Sea before. And that means that the power of the ark is not the box object that's described in the Bible as being built at the foot of Mount Sinai after crossing the Red Sea, but the power is something that was an object that was taken out of Egypt, and eventually that needed to be placed in some kind of protective device that is described as the box-like object covered in gold on the outside and covered in gold on the inside, which is basically a large capacitor, right? Which a capacitor is a device that holds energy and that could, in this case, shield the energy. And so it was most appropriate if they were going to travel in the desert that they built as fast as possible some kind of device to carry this object around. And so there's a split there that happens. There's a misunderstanding there that happens. The power of the ark is one object, and the ark itself is another. And the power of the ark, I believe, came right out of Egypt, which came prior to that, right out of the evolution of Atlantis. And that's why...
Yeah, I don't know what he goes on right here, but...
And so they were...
But I agree with him on what the Ark of the Covenant could have potentially been. And it's a really interesting observation. And as some of these old movies kind of talk a little bit about, like the old Indiana Jones movie, I'll show you, the Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever, how the Nazis, and it's true that the Nazis were in fact looking for the Ark of the Covenant. That is something they were actually doing actively. I think Himmler, or whatever his name is, I fucking forgot, and Hitler himself were into the occult, so they're actively searching for this thing. Oh, snap. Dead. There's the pillar of fire. You see the representation of the pillar of fire. So that's crazy. But that's just this is just a movie. But it's interesting to think that this object could have come from ancient Egypt, and that the Israelites took possession of it, and that's how they were able to win wars. And that's how I remember reading the Bible in one of those instances. He's able to they're able to throw stones using the Ark of the Covenant, so it can do a lot of different things. Really interesting. The Ark of the Covenant. I could go on for days about the Ark and its origins and what it really is and all this stuff. It's just really interesting. I'll show you guys another video of. Have you guys ever watched the movie Stargate? There's an interesting correlation to the origin of humanity, and it stands to reason that maybe other civilizations did interact with us. I personally don't believe it. I think it's a way to discredit ancient human civilizations that had these capabilities of building these megalithic structures. It's better to think, in my opinion, that we as humans are capable. I mean, shit, we have an iPhone today. I'm broadcasting via the internet telepathically to all y'all listening, so we've come a long way, to think that we didn't do this 12,500 years ago and maybe some cataclysm happened and we forgot and we started all over again, that seems to me more plausible than aliens came and fucking, maybe we developed this technology and maybe it just got lost through time. But speaking of Stargates, there are other interesting, so in Sri Lanka, there's a supposed Sri Lanka is a really weird place. It's a little island at the southernmost tip of India, and it has really ancient glyphs and caves and crazy places. But this thing's supposed to be some kind of Stargate drawing that is supposed to be, I think, like 3,000 years old or something like this, inside of a crazy temple that's like super old, and nobody has any explanation as to how it got there. But it's carved directly into the rock. Really crazy. But this place, Sri Lanka, is really weird place. They also have another place called Eden. It's like the top of a mountain, and it has a temple. Let me see if I have that here for you guys. No, but on the subject of Stargates, there's also this crazy place. I believe it's in Turkey, and very Mesoamerican looking. It's just like the beginning of a. I would think that maybe they were starting to carve a structure out of this stone, and they never got around to finishing it. But I think there's nothing behind it, so that theory is flawed. But it's considered to be some type of, people call it a Stargate. And then in Peru, there's one very similar to that. And people also call it, of course they're going to call it Stargate. This one's trippy. It has one of these false doors in the middle. I believe this one actually does have more rock behind it, so it could be that they were quarrying this, maybe cutting it out, using it for other purposes. Who knows? But another interesting piece, Stargate looking thing. And yeah, it's really interesting. Ancient technology and how they could have done this, I have no idea. Quartz seems to, there's speculation from scientists themselves. After looking at the top of the pyramid, they think that the top of the pyramid was made of solid quartz as well, and potentially, maybe used as some kind of nightlight or something. So that's really interesting. So I said I was going to look at the Ark of the Covenant, and particularly what it has to do with the human evolution from the Christian perspective. So let's talk a little about the Bible, because the Bible is a really old book too, and they say a lot of crazy stuff. So one of the first things I'll point out that I think you guys should look more into is this dude Melchizedek, because there's a cult called the Cult of Melchizedek, and they are a new cult, and they believe in something like they believe basically in aliens, and they believe the Ark of the Covenant came from aliens. And the interesting thing about this dude Melchizedek is that he's mentioned only a few times in the Bible, but he's of the highest order. So higher than Christ, higher than the ancient Israelites. He's like the original God, you can almost say, Melchizedek. And he's not mentioned too many times. But another one, ancient organization, the Zarathustras or the Zoroasters, also believe in something very similar, some type of alien belief that we got this technology from angels or from seraphim or whatever you want to call it. They call it seraphims, or beings from the burning one. So it's really crazy stuff. There's a movie with Christopher Walken called The Prophecy, and they talk a little bit about seraphims and some of these. Let's see if I have something for you guys here on that. Probably not, but yeah, it's really interesting. But what that has to do with the Ark of the Covenant is that these dudes basically believe in exactly that it's an ancient alien technology. I'm not one to believe that theory, but it's interesting that people back then, so long ago did. And what does it mean? So there's this dude Melchizedek. He's an interesting character, right? He's of the highest order. But when it comes to the order of humanity and religion, according to the Bible, it's really interesting to look at. Because as we know, Hitler, he looked a lot into this stuff, and he was obsessed with the master race and the pure race and this and that. He was a weirdo. But we can see here, according to the Bible, there was Adam and Eve, right, who were forged by God, and they had 3 sons, and one of them got murked. And so then, if we follow and we can say that these beings here, the Bible says that that angels mated with humans, creating Nephilim, and that the world had to be destroyed, right? And then it mentions that Adam and Eve came to play after the creation of the earth. And then these guys, according to Nassim Haramein, could have been all possessing these Arks of Covenants type technologies, which is why there was a great flood and that destroyed. So everything from Noah and back, all these people are said to have lived thousands of years. Like, if you look at how long they lived, it in the Bible, according to the Bible, it says they lived thousands of years. So people don't know if it means groups of people or if it means specific individuals, but these people live for thousands of years. And right when you get to Noah, everyone gets murked by the great flood, and then we get Noah. And then this is something that a really interesting observation. We get Noah, and we get the 3 sons of Noah, Shem, Japheth, and Ham. And the Bible doesn't explain how Noah procreates, by the way. It doesn't say that he got himself a girl. It's not specific. But here are the 3 sons, right? So it's really important to look at this because something really, really interesting arises from his sons Shem and his sons Japheth. So I want you guys to see this. According to the Bible, this is all the Middle East, by the way. You can say that Ham, the people of Ham, are Africans or Middle Eastern black people. So the Cushites would be northern Or Africans, the Mizraim would be like the Egyptians, the Canaanites. So the people of Ham would be like African, Ethiopian, African, Northern African, Egyptian, and so forth, right? And you can say that the people of Japheth were Europeans, the people of Gomer. These people migrated north from Noah, right? So Noah has 3 sons. Those 3 sons migrate, form their own families, and travel from where the ship lands or whatever. They travel after the great flood, right? So this is post-flood. So then the sons of Japheth, let's take a really close look at that, because the sons of Japheth are all of these sons here. And then from Gomer arises the Ashkenazi. Now, why is that important? Because there's a really interesting argument that a lot of people have made in the past, that modern day Jew people, modern day, what I would say are European Jews from Ashkenazi mountains, from the Ashkenazi region bloodline. You can also do DNA tests and find how much, like, I think Ethan from H3 is like 99 point some shit percent Ashkenazi Jew, right? And Ela, his wife, on the other hand, is something like, she's like Iranian, Middle Eastern, and like a little bit Jew. So even though she lives in Israel, so that's a really interesting find that she's from Israel, but Ethan is more Jewish than her. So let's take that into consideration, because the tribes of Judah come from the sons of Ham, not from Japheth. This is where the Japheth line ends. But if we look at the sons of Ham, which would be considered, in my opinion, black people, we got Mizra, we got the Cushite kingdom, the Canaanites, and basically, if you follow this line all the way, and you get basically Africa, right? And then if you follow this side, sons of Shem, right, and you follow that all the way, you get something really interesting. You get Abraham comes from Shem, not Japheth. Abraham comes from the lineage of Shem. So Hitler was basically wrong, because if you wanted to be a true Aryan, you would have to be an Ashkenaz or one of these civilizations here, or genealogical traits according to the Bible. Of course, this is not scientific. This is biblical information based on what the book says. But if we follow from the sons of Shem, we basically, in my opinion, get ancient Mesopotamian culture, and we get Abraham. And everybody knows that from Abrahamic religions came the Muslim religion, came Christianity. Everything came from Abrahamic religion, but most importantly, the 12 tribes of Israel, which if we follow Abraham, then you get Isaac, and then you get Jacob, and then from Jacob, you see you get all these people, but then at some point, you get the 12 tribes. Let's see if we can find them real quick. God damn. It's a group of people. Maybe I went too far. Hold up. Oh, look, Solomon with his 700 wives. Crazy. Where is Judah and the 12 tribes? Let's find them. Because that would point back at the fact that from Abraham came everyone. The 12 tribes, Levi, and here they are. Here's Levi. Here's all of them. Zebulon, Asher, where is Judah? But anyways, it's too complicated to look through this damn chart. But at some point, the tribes of Judah essentially come from not from where the Ashkenaz, which is funny because they claim to be the true. They claim to have priority over the Holy Land because they are 100% Jews, but not according to the Bible or to the Torah or to the Kabbalah or to any of these ancient books, which is really funny. Some other ancient artifacts to consider is that Jewish people blow on this horn here called a shofar. And there's groups of what they call themselves the Black Israelites that make this observation as well, that the shofar is this ancient Hebrew device that they blow at, during certain ceremonies. And here it says they blow it on every weekday morning of the month, blah, 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 right? But the interesting thing about the shofar that they don't talk about here in this article is that it comes from the greater kudu. And that animal, the greater kudu, is not native anywhere in the Middle East. It's an African beast. So that's a really funny observation, that this ancient thing, this ancient horn, has an African origin. It doesn't have a Middle Eastern origin. So that's another funny observation. But what does that have to do with ancient human origins? Well, we want to know who had possession of the ark, and we want to know these things, ancient technologies, right? And so that's kind of why I bring it up. I'm not trying to get into racist arguments with people today. I have a whole thing here specifically about science and how it compares to religion, but that's a whole super long topic I don't want to get into. I'm happy to summarize with you guys my thoughts on this ancient technology and some of the human origins stories. There's also this discovery of different DNA found in people that implicates that there was a different type of Homo sapien. And now we know that there is the Denisovan hominin, which is now also a new discovery in 2010, based on DNA evidence and based on these molars that they found, that there was definitely another type of human that was smaller, and you can see the origins of that being, mostly in the Asian regions. So that's really another really interesting find that puts a hole in how we think of humanity. Like, I feel like scientists are just too fucking lazy. Like, all humans came from Africa, and they must have crossed over the Bering Strait and blah 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 blah. Like, it's just such simple. But recently they found that in the Philippines, they found evidence of people living in the Philippines for like hundreds of thousands of years. So that also doesn't explain how people arrived in the Philippines. According to 700,000 years ago. This is big news, and this is like actually accepted by mainstream science, that this happened. So humans are a lot older than we think, and I don't like to get into hominids and pre Homo sapien kind of stuff, because it's a lot of, in my opinion, speculation. The one thing that I get really upset with science is that they get into this speculative talk, but they're never willing to say it's speculation. Like, you can be watching a documentary made by like fucking BBC or National Geographic, and they'll say, 25 million years ago, blah, 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 as if they know. Like, no, tell us that it's a theory. You know, tell us that it's a prediction. Tell us that we have to have faith to believe it and that it can change at any moment when we discover new evidence. Don't say it's a fact. But people like Neil deGrasse Tyson go on Joe Rogan podcast and they just say stuff like it's fact. And I find that to be just as annoying as when a Christian says that the world was made 2,000 years ago and then that's a fact, you know? It's just as annoying. So let's keep our minds open because there's a lot of new information coming out we just don't know. You know? Sri Lanka, Cambodia, these places that were relatively unexplored, you know? And it's really interesting. Buddhism, I was intrigued a lot by Buddhism and I read all of the Buddhist works, but now these days I'm more interested in Sanskrit. I'm more interested in like, you know, ancient Hindu stuff because it's older. And like this place called Adam's Peak in Sri Lanka. It's a crazy rock formation with a temple at the very top. Really interesting place, you know, and I kind of got all these points mapped out on Google Maps in case if anybody wants that, I can send it to them. You guys can check them all out for yourself. A link to all those locations. Really interesting stuff. But yeah, watch some of this stuff, guys. Watch this movie, Chariot of the Gods. Stay away from the ancient alien stuff. You know, kind of, you know, let's look at it from a realistic point of view. And let's talk about what could have happened 12,000, 13,000 years ago. And what were humans doing back then that they were forming these crazy rocks and painting these crazy things. And in ancient India, there's a lot of crazy ancient things being discovered in India as well, like temples being cut out of solid rock. I don't know the name of that temple. Let me see if I can find. But there's a temple in India cut out of, like, it's not built, like it's fucking cut out of a whole piece of rock. Let me see. Hindu temple. Solid rock. I'm sure there has to be some images of this crazy place. Oh yeah, here it is. This place is amazing. It's a temple cut out of solid fucking rock. Like, it's not... It's literally cut out of the mountain. It wasn't built using blocks or anything like that. And every inch of it is covered in all kinds of carvings. Cool-ass stuff. You know? And scientists are not willing to say that this thing is older than 3,000 years. But who knows how old this is. And I would say look this place up, the Kailasa Temple. So lots of new things in areas where people were unwilling to search. Cut out of solid rock, again, with these ancient megalithic structures that we would have a hard time building today. Cutting them out of the fucking mountain. Really interesting. A whole temple cut out of a single piece of rock. It's amazing. But you know, yeah, keep up with the information and let me know if you guys found anything new. Any cool new findings. I want to start making more of these ancient. This is like the first of many. So any and all topics, megalithic structures, ancient technology, even I'm willing to go into aliens. Fuck it, not this time, but on the next one we can do an alien specific podcast. How's that? We could talk about religion. We can talk about angels, demons, demonology, anything. So we're gonna go on this conspiracy journey. Maybe one day a week we'll do a conspiracy podcast. Or not conspiracy, or yeah, fuck it, everything. Conspiracies. I'm willing to do anything. But yeah, man, thank you guys for tuning in. It's always hella fun doing podcasts for no reason. This studio I'm gonna shut down, so I'm gonna relocate it So this will be the last time you'll see this particular setup, but next time I'll just do it somewhere else, in a new setup. So, new things coming. But yeah, man, if you guys find anything, DM me. Just send me messages, send me stuff to info@djoccult.com. Send me links there. Any cool, interesting links. I'm always saving this kind of stuff. Ooh, I forgot to talk about these places, the Nazca Lines. Look that up too. Super cool places with cool glyphs that you can only see from the sky. Yeah, any other cool stuff that you guys have found that you think is niche? Not the crazy ancient aliens kind of stuff, but like, just things that are underrated. Send me underrated stuff that you think is cool, and I'll check it out. Yeah, man. I'm gonna sign out now. I'll see y'all on the next one.